All right. Well, first off, thank you everybody for coming to join and give your afternoon to us to listen to about the call for a common home, call for caring for a common home. As an introductory matter, I have some visitors on this call who I do not know who are not in Villanova Law School. So my name is Michael Schmidt. I'm a third year student. Me and Alice Douglas I'm vice president. She's president of the Environmental and Energy Law Society on campus. We are co-hosting this event with the St. Thomas More Society, which is the Catholic Law Society, which we have some representatives from there too. I see Nick Dowdle is on the call. And then I'm not sure if I see Hannah or not, but yeah. So basically, our discussion today is aimed at just sort of seeing what stewardship means for people who work in law and policy or who work in religious fields. Lately, there's been a shift in attitude, at least in the Catholic Church, in giving environmental issues more attention and really sort of incorporating them more into dogma. So we're going to ponder a little bit about that today as well. So I'll go ahead and let our guest speakers introduce themselves. I'll ask them who they are, what their workplace is, where they're phoning in from, and if they want to talk about what type of work they do, how they got interested, any particular environmental or faith issues that matter to you. I'll just let them go ahead and decide how they want to approach that question, but I'll let Father Art Picaro, apologize if I'm mispronouncing that, but I'll let Father Picaro.
My mother couldn't pronounce it right either. So. I'm very pleased to be here to join you. And briefly, I'm from the Bronx, brought up in the Bronx, graduated from Villanova in 1971, not 1871. And right from graduation, I went to Peru. I spent almost my entire life in Peru. I worked in the desert, which you can imagine the effects there, as well as in the Andes Mountain. Right, basic, no electricity, no running water, no medical services. I started from scratch. It was a very challenging mission, which I volunteered for, having come from the Bronx. It's a very different world. But part of my time in Peru, I served in Rome for the administration of the Augustinians. And part of the responsibility I had there during those 12 years was to set up our relationship with the United Nations. We became part of the Department of Public Information at the UN. And that was when the Millennium Development Goals were developed and then implemented. So I was very much involved in that. Went back to Peru for 7 more years before coming here to Villanova after those years away to catch up to where I was before. I'm in Core Hall. I work in mission and ministry. I teach theology to undergrads. The course I have this semester is Stewardship of Creation, Environmental Justice. And my interest is spurred because of Francis's document on Care of Our Common Home. We brought Cardinal Turkson here, who was the intellectual author of that document. He was received in engineering, received a degree from the university, but he's certainly not the first pope to speak very clearly on this topic. We haven't been listening very well, and I would say a good portion of the church is still not listening, and we who are charged to preach do very little speaking about the topic. So I'm glad to have this opportunity to share with you.
Great, thank you. And next we'll move on to Bruce Morrison to introduce himself, please.
Morning, everybody. I've got a snappy label for stewardship panels that I participate on, and it is that I am an Episcopal Methodist Lutheran Jew on the faculty at a Jesuit university.
Wow.
That's my label. I've been an environmental litigator for 32 years. I'm president of Great Rivers Environmental Law Center in St. Louis. I got into law, not necessarily environmental law, but law generally to analyze and solve problems. And that means that my practice began where less than 50% of our work, or roughly 50%, was public interest environmental law, and we used other work to fund that public interest practice. That was before the formation of Great Rivers Environmental Law Center, which is a nonprofit. The good takeaway there is that you can use your law degree to protect the environment, even if it's part-time, as your interests develop and your legal practice evolves. You don't have to be a full-time environmental lawyer to feel the rewards of practicing environmental law. Now, others at Great Rivers have more inspiring stories than I have. Mine sure is not inspiring, which mine is more, is it inertia? I got into this work doing full-time environmental largely by staying behind the same desk. The law center, when it formed in 2002, took over the work of the law firm that I started with. It is the same piece of furniture. So inertia or laziness, but others at Great Rivers have more inspiring stories. From one lawyer who told me, when I was 4 years old, I drew a picture of me as a lawyer by day and a garbage man by night, which has involved in my being an environmental enforcement lawyer today. Another lawyer, Sarah, writing that I created my own environmental science major before my university had such a major. I then worked for a lawyer at Environmental Defense Fund who encouraged me to go to law school. Now I am in my dream job. And still one more, I feel peace and joy. I never feel more alive than when I am in nature. So different stories from different staff members.
Very nice.
Thanks, Michael.
All right, I'll let Jennifer Clark go next.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm actually from the Philadelphia area originally. I'm currently a volunteer attorney at Clean Air Council, which is a local Philadelphia-based nonprofit environmental group, which also has offices in Pittsburgh. So they do a lot of state work. I became involved with kind of like my interest in the environment kind of started when I was younger. I guess in high school, probably I was really just appalled at how much trash people threw out. And I guess that's only kind of the tip of the iceberg of a lot of environmental issues. But I got involved with my high school's environmental advocacy group. And I grew up right outside of Chester, Pennsylvania, which a lot of people are familiar with from the environmental justice side of things. That's kind of like one of the areas around here where it is a class, it's definitely an example of what environmental racism looks like. And there's a concentration of all kinds of waste processing plants in just that one area of a very racially diverse and economically disadvantaged area. So I became aware of that issue very early on, even when I was in high school. And when I went to college, I studied engineering because I just was really interested in the sciences, and I was told by a number of people that I could apply a lot of science in the engineering area, and I thought, well, this would be a great area for me to get into to work in the environment, just to help like clean up spills and different things. Like I figured chemical engineering would be a really great way for me to get involved in a pro-environment kind of job, but I really had no luck getting a job in that area when I graduated. And so I went to work in manufacturing for a little while. Thought that I really wanted to get maybe something else to maybe help me get more on like doing more of what I'm passionate about. So I decided to go to law school with the idea of potentially doing some work in the environment through being a lawyer. And when I was at law school, I went to Widener, which is a local school. I was in the Environmental and Natural Resources Law Clinic and got to work on some really great cases through there. Was really hoping to get into environmental law when I graduated, but that wasn't the case. It's a very small, narrow field, as a lot of people know. And so I went to work as a patent attorney, probably because of my engineering background. And so I got some experience as a patent attorney at a big law firm in Philadelphia for a couple of years. I quickly decided that the big law firm wasn't the environment that I wanted, and decided to go back into engineering for a little while just because I was looking for an environmental law position, and that really didn't come up for me. It was basically around the time of the 2008 recession, so it was very hard to find work in that time period in any case. So now, fast forward to today, I still have this passion of using my law degree for advocating for the environment in whatever way that I can contribute. And so I figured the best way to try to branch into that field is to start doing some volunteer work, get some more experience to add on to what I had in law school. And so that's what I'm doing now is I've been volunteering with Clean Air Council for about 9 months, and just a really great group to work with, lots of different issues, all kinds of different things to get involved with. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Very great. Thank you, Jen. And next I'll go to Professor Agard to close up our introductions.
So hello, everyone. It's great to see some familiar faces and some new folks. I'm Todd Agard. I teach on the faculty here at Villanova at the law school. Father Art and I are on the university sustainability council, so it's good to see his face. But let me see my brief story. So I grew up in Southern California, a suburb of LA, and have always been interested in environmental issues. I think some of that was out of self-interest. So when I was a kid, if you went out to play, a lot of days in LA, you came in and you coughed for an hour because you had what we called a smog attack. That's how bad the air pollution was growing up. And I also saw, orange groves being torn down to build strip malls and stuff like that. So I think there was some self-interest of what kind of world do I want to live in? And then also, I think I was brought up in a family with a strong sense of feeling of responsibility to other people and caring for other people. And it struck me that one of the ways that we need to care about each other is to care about the planet that we live in and the planet that we're passing on to future generations. And so I've always been super interested in environmental issues. Not particularly interested in becoming a lawyer, but, so I was sort of looking for what my path would be, and kind of fell into law school by happenstance. But just by the end of the first week, I knew that I wanted to be a lawyer and I wanted to be involved in the law because I just found it so engaging, and it's been such a good channel for me to think about some of the issues that I like to think about of how we should structure our governments, our policies, our planet, so to make this a more livable world for now and for future generations. And so out of law school, after clerking for a judge, I worked for the Justice Department for 8 years, litigating a wide variety of cases. And that was a great experience, kind of for maybe a different reason than Bruce Morrison was talking about it. So he gets to litigate on the right side and believe deeply in the causes that he's probably pursuing. For the government, you're usually caught in the middle, and there's a lot of compromises. There's a lot of how much can you do, very incremental progress. And I actually really liked that because I felt like it was, maybe that's just sort of my personality of being able to see like small change as still change, and the importance of it, and the importance of being part of a conversation even with people that disagree with you. So I really, really enjoyed that experience, but I had always wanted to become a teacher. So I left there to become a faculty member here and at Villanova, and I've loved that experience. Just dealing with students and future lawyers and lawyers when they're out in the world. It's been so gratifying to connect with so many students and to see so many students turn into great environmental lawyers and to play a small role in that and help them in any way I can. And that's where I am here. So I'll leave it at that for now.
Great. Thank you very much, everybody. And I want to set aside some time at the end of the hour for audience participation, but if questions come up, feel free to raise your hand or type them in the chat. I'll be sure to incorporate your guys into the discussion as well. So I guess to start off, we should probably have a working baseline of what stewardship actually is. And this definition kind of changes contextually depending on whether you're approaching it from an environmental perspective or from a faith-based perspective. For example, NOAA, National Oceanic Atmospheric Association, they define stewardship as the responsible use and protection of the natural environment through conservation and sustainable practices to enhance ecosystem resilience and human well-being. And this can manifest in ways such as restoration and protection practices, individual human choices, community awareness, civic actions. And they also are mindful of the distinction of a stewardship action, which is an activity or behavior or decision that people can do, as opposed to a stewardship measure, which is what are we seeing that is resulting from these activities that is a sort of benchmark towards growth, I guess. On the other hand, like from a more Catholic-based perspective, the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops frames stewardship as more broad than just the environment. Quote from Peter, "As each one of us has received a gift, we use it to serve one another as good stewards of God's varied grace." And a lot of this ties into Catholics' calls to be disciples, recognizing that God is giving us life, He's the giver of freedom, the source of all things, and that we should be grateful and eager to use whatever resources He's provided for us. And stewardship kind of manifests in stewardship through creation, which is care and cultivation of the world, stewardship of vocation, in which that each one of us as humans has a unique role in carrying out the divine plan, and steward of the church, in which we all collaborate and cooperate in continuing the message of Jesus Christ, which, as I come to understand, kind of the overall goals and messages behind taking care of the earth and taking care of the environment, they are quite compatible between the two fields of thought. But I would just like to pose a question to our speakers of what their personal working definition of stewardship that they tend to adopt in their practice.
That's a fairly easy one from my point of view. I'm on the Sustainability Leadership Council along with Todd, a co-chair of that. I fell into it. And so my background brought me to it, my commitment to understanding that God, the transcendent being, has created everything for everybody. All God's good gifts for all. So the purpose of life is that it flourish, that things be as they are meant to be, that we are meant who we are meant to be, and the same is true of nature itself. The challenge, particularly coming back to the United States and realizing a lot of the concern about the environment had to do with climate, carbon footprint, and climate control, which I'm not obviously denying, although there are some who would. But yes, this is an issue. But our Catholic understanding, Catholic in the broad sense as universal, is to understand that all that we have, all that we are, is related. And Francis is very insistent on it in the document Care of Our Common Home, that everything is interconnected. Our tendency to try to address one issue skewers the other. A lot of fantastic quotes, but just from the document paragraph number 49, there's, after saying everything is connected, concern for the environment needs to be joined to a sincere love for our fellow human being and an unwavering commitment to resolving problems of society. So a true ecological approach always becomes a social approach. Hear the cry of the earth, yes, and hear the cry of the poor. So a lot of my attention to the particular element of the church, liberation theology, is to hear the cry of the poor. Christ is present in the poor, to walk with the poor, give the poor the opportunity to, but realizing that also skewers, just as only hearing the cry of the planet skewers, that everything is interdependent, everything is connected. God is communion, harmony, relationship, that diversity is to be rejoiced in. So to dedicate stewardship, understood as simply care of the planet, will not cut and to think that we can do this ourselves. And remember, I worked a lot with engineers, and they would design a program, and we have a university sustainability plan. And thanks be to God, developed all across college. But a lot of people think that, yes, we can do it. I believe we can do it, but not without God. And God has chosen to not do it without us. We need God, and we need to use our reason, faith and science, faith and reason, not one or the other. It's both and. So that's where my interpretation, my reading, my understanding of stewardship lies, that we're in this together, and it's for an ethos of sustainable life. It's a way of life. What I do with my garbage says who I think my God is. How much I care about you is manifested by what I do with my energy, with my electricity. So I hope that helps understand the posture from where I come. And I believe it's what Francis is trying to communicate in this document on Care of Our Common Home.
And I understand that you're referencing Pope Francis's work, Laudato Si, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, which was published 5 years ago, which from my understanding is representing a shift in the attitude of the Catholic Church towards actually taking environmental issues and ecological issues more seriously. And so with that change, it makes me wonder, how has the environmental side of things changed too? Like I recall from my class with Professor Agard how like in the initial laws that regulated air pollution and water pollution, they weren't enacted for the benefit of the environment. They were enacted to achieve other objectives related to economy and use of the resources itself. So I'm curious if either Professor or Bruce or Jen would like to speak about any notices that they've seen of a change in the if they've noticed any like shifting changes, I guess, in the way that environmental laws have been coming and been enacting, and how agencies and lawyers have been approaching environmental issues.
I can speak a little bit about that. I do see in some, even recently, in some like local laws, and maybe not on the federal level or even on the state level, but just even on the county level, there is somewhat of a push to bring in additional like environmental laws that are like more like health laws. And you know, like Art was talking about, it is very circular. Like how we take care of the environment also affects ourselves, because we live here, we live on Earth, and if we are not good stewards of it, we will also suffer. And so I've seen just recently working with a couple of county regulations for certain like air pollution issues, that they've adopted some like county level regulations that will discuss like emissions into the air, and it doesn't overlap with like say what the EPA or the air laws state. So it's a different way of approaching the same kind of issue, like how much emissions are going into the air and how that affects health and you know, other living beings around us. So it's another way to help the situation. It's been really interesting to explore that area.
I'll expand on what Jennifer has to say as far as the heightened importance of laws at the local level. I think over the years, if I think back to when I first became a lawyer in 1988, for a few years, there was substantial activity at the federal level. There was meaningful legislation, but there hasn't been that for decades. So now, if we want to make change as environmental advocates, we're trying to make that change either at the state and local level. And in Missouri, it's really not at the state level either. It's got to be at the local level. I do see a health-based focus, as Jennifer sees. I see a strong social justice and an environmental justice focus today that has not been there in the past. And I'm grateful for Michael's second question, because after hearing Father Picaro's answer, I think my answer would have been a dud. When we talk about spirituality, it really doesn't come into our day-to-day practice here at the Law Center, and thus I'm fine with either of the definitions that Michael gave, the Catholic-based definition and the Noah definition. But perhaps there is a filter on my day every day as I think about how I start every day, and I do start with prayer, and an important part of it is that I am to love my neighbor. And I think that probably then does unconsciously or subconsciously filter into how I practice law throughout the day.
It's interesting that you raise some of those issues about, human focus versus nature focus and things. I feel like in practice, and I think it has been a change over time, that those distinctions matter less than they used to. I think as we come to understand our world better ecologically, I think the distinctions between economics and the environment kind of evaporate. So there's this whole school of thinking about ecosystem services, of the economic importance that we derive from different ecological functions of the planet, and things like that, and make these distinctions between, well, do you care about people or do you care about the planet, kind of go away. In the work that we've been doing on the Sustainability Council, the UN's Sustainability Development Goals, they're so broad that you often ask yourself, are we doing the environment here, or is this something else? And the answer is yes, right? And to go back to what Father Art said, whether theologically or ecologically, the first rule is always everything is interconnected and everything is interdependent. And from that, a certain responsibilities follow. And I think when you see it in those terms, a lot of these sort of political distinctions that we thought were there, of who are we trying to help, what are we trying to do, what do we care about, kind of become second, not matter so much, because when everything is connected, you can't distinguish economic well-being from ecological well-being, frankly, from spiritual well-being. And so to me, our deeper understanding over time has led some of these distinctions that we thought maybe were going to be important to seem not so important. There's plenty of challenges still, but maybe not the challenges that we thought we were going to face back in the 1970s.
It's interesting how you note that the political undertones, I guess, are becoming less and less relevant as time goes on, because just from my own noticing and perception, it seems like backlash towards anything towards environmental health is often portrayed as a political stance, I guess. But that's just my own personal observation, my understanding of it from what I see online mostly. But I want to go back to reiterating what Father Art said from Laudato Si. I'm going to mispronounce that every single time I say it, I'm sure. But the idea that, so we have to realize that a true ecological approach always is a social approach that integrates questions of justice in the environment, as well as to hear both the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor. And this is a direct link to what environmental justice is all about, which seems to be a growing popular topic that I see. And from what I gather just from seeing on social media, a lot of people who suffer the brunt of negative externalities and who are often the ones who bear the worst burdens, they seem to have a sense that legal tools are not really working in their favor, and that they don't really have much faith in the legal system itself. And when we talk about how the local regulations are starting to become more, I guess, more prevalent maybe than the federal legislation that's been around for years, how would you address the concern that to trust in the legal system, I guess?
So related to Jen, just to say that Chester environmental injustice, this is as good as it gets. It's so awful. And I help out in Chester on weekends. It's one of the parishes that I help out in the Spanish-speaking Mass. So, but I've lived on the other side. I've lived and seen the consequences of environmental injustice in Peru. I've seen fair trade, and I've seen what fair trade also has left in Peru. And that's why one of my major concerns with the Sustainability Leadership Council and the University Sustainability Plan is realizing that it's got to be just more than laws. It's awareness. It's caring for one another. It's an ethos of living. It's a lifestyle. And that's where Francis goes in this document. And it's a lot easier, Michael, to call it care for our common home than it is Laudato Si. Of course, as long as the contents are understood, call it what you want. But what it is, it's integral ecology. Integral. Everybody, everything, and the whole person, the whole of creation. So ecology, which touches on everybody and everything. So our university sustainability plan, as Todd points out, I'm on one of the committees, I'm in one of the subcommittees of one of the committees, and we're working on living wage here at university, how important that is on parent leave. What does that have to do with everything? You skewer if you're only concerned about climate control. You skewer if you're only concerned about water. Yes, water. And yes, so we have an integral plan which covers all of our relationship, all of our life together. But the danger here, though, I related to what your question is on law, because we're liable to think that this is a plan that the university has for us. Either it's our plan or it's a waste of paper. So our intent, the goal, is to encourage, educate, get people talking about, thinking, and working on all these various topics which come under the title of sustainability, stewardship, care for our common home. Everybody benefits, everything benefits, for all, for the next generation as well as for our own generation. So the idea, rather than to legislate, rather than to impose, which I recognize sometimes we need to do. I mean, most of us on the screen here are human beings, which means we're limited and we're sinful, and we need encouragement. The plan goes by way of encouragement, rather than impose, to propose, rather than to dictate, to educate as many people as possible in this process. So that's why we do workshops on sustainability. What it's about, we get ideas from as many people as possible. How can we address the styrofoam? How can we address the misuse of electricity? All these issues which are our life together. And will we solve it? The sustainability plan is based on sow what you hope to reap. Plant what you hope to harvest. If we want a better world for everybody and everything, if we want relationships, proper relationships, well then that's what we meant to sow, communion. Don't build walls, build bridges. Dialogue is the path to communion. And if it's not too evident in Francis's present document, this encyclical Care of Our Common Home, wait till October 4th, when the next encyclical circular letter from the Pope comes out, which will be on dialogue, the importance of respecting one another, respecting different points of view, and listening to one another to achieve a better life for everybody. So less laws, I'm talking to lawyers here, more convinced and being convinced of the process of listening to one another, working together. We need one another. We need God. God, fool that he is, has chosen to need us to build a better world for everybody.
Michael, if I could expound on that
Sure.
briefly. How do we address that trust issue? I think Father Picaro is dead on right. We don't impose, we listen, and we build relationships. In 2016, I joined the nation's oldest and largest civil rights organization, the NAACP. And the president of the Missouri State Conference for the NAACP promptly asked that I chair the Environmental Justice Committee for the state and address the membership at the annual meeting. And I thought, really, how well is this going to go over? New person, white. I didn't even think I could join the NAACP. I thought it was limited to people who weren't white. But I explained that to him, and he gave me a big hug and said, "You're up, go." And I stood up there, and I was looking at 350 people in the audience. There was one other white person there. Hands were folded across their chests as they were waiting to hear what Morrison was going to say on what would be best for people that don't look like me. Since it was pure improv, the only thing I had to say was, I'm new, and I am here to listen and to learn, and probably learn for a lifetime, but to listen and take direction, and we see where we go. And over the 4 years, I have made friendships, I've built relationships. The relationships have allowed me to get beyond this trust issue. But after listening comes the task of, and it's really not a task, it's really a labor of love, lifetime friendships that I otherwise would not have had.
Very nice. Father Art, I really like what you had to say about how everything is all connected, part of an integral plan, and then how Bruce reiterated how encouragement and proposal and listening are things that we should focus on. However, I get nervous personally when we shift the conversation towards awareness as our goal. When people understand that, I feel that means that, oh, if I am aware of these problems, I'm at least like doing something good, when there's not when critics can point out that there's not actual constructive change resulting from that awareness itself. And so this ties into one of my other questions of, what do you do about the people who just don't act, who are complicit, and they might be of the right opinion and agree with what you're saying, but how do we address those people and get them to make that jump into actually maybe changing their practices or dedicating resources, and somehow how do you suggest we go about that, I guess?
I'll throw out quickly, as I'm sure the presenters have better ideas, certainly broader ideas. But I think the methodology is what enters into line here. It's the methodology of that document, Laudato Si, Care of Our Common Home. It's see, judge, act. And it revolves around the ability to listen. I see what I see. And if I'm willing to hear what you see, I will be richer. You have got a diverse point of view. If I think I'm enough, and I'm talking to Americans here, right? Our culture, which is built on me first, individualism, rugged individualism. And in the face of that, I mean, this is what we're based on as a country. Christian faith is trying to, and universal principles are trying to help us understand the value of each and every human being, of listening, attending, respecting the dignity of everybody, not because of the color of their skin. We don't judge people because of how much money they have in the bank or the degree they have hanging on the wall. It's that each of us are worth infinite value. Each of us is a daughter or son of God. So the value that we have, being able to listen to one another, that's where it starts. I don't have all the answers. I don't have the T, capital T, truth. Together, we're better if I'm willing to listen, and you're willing to listen. So C, we talk about the issues, whatever that issue is. In this case, a very broad issue, sustainability. And then we hear what the absolute other has to say about this. Universal principles. Our interpretation of the transcendent being, God. We could go to scripture, but we can certainly go to the principles, the 4 principles, basic principles of social thought. Our dignity of each person, common good, subsidiarity, and solidarity. In our conversation, we take into account those 4 principles, listening to not just our wisdom, but universal wisdom, which can help us see from an absolutely different point of view. So see, in order to discern. We're discerning because we're listening to one another, and we're also listening to universal principles. I call them Catholic social thought, a great secret. people have ever heard of. Most of us go to Mass regularly and never hear the words. Lord, don't forgive us. And then we see and we judge in order to act. In order to act. So that we are preparing ourselves to be actors, builders, constructors, collaborators with God of a better world. We don't do it for academic titillation or our own enjoyment when I publish this paper on. No, we want a better world because we know that we all deserve it, everybody. So that is what the incentive to act, and not just act me alone, individualism, but act together. How can we do that? By discovering together what would be best at this present moment. So is it a permanent solution? No. It's we sow what we hope to reap. We're building relationships, we're building communion, we're better, and we know that we can't do it without God, and we might not do it, we'll never do it in our own lifetime, but together we can do better. So it is to move us to act. The methodology which the Pope employs, methodology which I encourage us to use, certainly the methodology which we used in the University Sustainability Plan. See, discern, act. We have to move on this together. I hope I've helped answer that question. I'm sure there's better ideas.
I was just going to add into just the C part of what you're talking about is that we need to utilize and listen to our scientific community in so many parts of this, in this era, like just with the new knowledge that's coming out about different things and studies of how things are affecting different communities, how things are affecting the world. And I think we really need to also, listen to science and what's happening in our world as a result of things that are going on. So I think that is also a really big part of it too, is to listen to what the facts are telling us and to keep things unbiased in that way. So yeah, that's what I wanted to add on that.
The dilemma that you pose reminds me of a frustration that I sometimes get teaching, and I know fellow teachers do, of when you give a test or some sort of assessment and the students don't perform the way that you're hoping, there's kind of two responses. One is, why can't they do this? What's wrong with them? What did they do wrong? And the other is, how can I contribute differently to what goes on in the classroom and what goes on in the course? Because clearly I'm not doing my part because they're not they're not able to see what I want them to see, and they're not able to do what I want them to do. And so I think it's kind of the same thing with the environment. Like there's a way to lead which I think is a bad way to lead, where you shake your finger at a bunch of people and tell them they should be different. And there's a way to lead where you show people a different, better way. And I think the more you see people acting in a way that you think is contrary to what should be our ethos, the more, instead of getting frustrated and wanting to wag our finger at people, the more we should be thinking, well, what are more creative and different ways that we can lead that speak to a broader range of people? Maybe the way that we're doing it, maybe we need to diversify our approaches or find new ways.
Yeah, and that kind of sort of ties into my follow-up question. Like when you see people who choose to decline to actually listen or spread goodness or actively choose to do the opposite of what we find to fall in line with our values. I mean, we have to think like lawyers sometimes, anticipate the opposite argument. Why do you think that these people are not open to the idea of listening and implementing changes and actually proceeding with things for the betterment of people?
Well, we can't. It's impossible for us to walk in another's shoes, and we all face that same obstacle. The closest we can ever get, I think, is to build the relationship, build the friendship, and then it's a lot easier to act. So, For example, outside of the environmental focus, when I talk with my new friends, my new black and brown friends who I've met through my work with the NAACP, when they tell me about how they what it's like when they get behind the wheel of a car, and they have fears that I don't worry about getting pulled over by a police officer, but it's one thing to look at the statistics, and I get them from the state attorney general, about how in one municipality here in the St. Louis area, if you're black, you're 8 times more likely to be pulled over than if you're white. And they don't get much better than that in the other municipalities throughout the state, but 8 times. I don't have those same fears. So it's one thing to read about them and be concerned, be disgusted, think that somebody ought to make change. But when I hear now my friends that I've built relationships talking about how this happens to them, it becomes a lot easier. I can't walk in their shoes, but if I put myself, or if anybody puts themselves in a position of being in their place, going to where they are rather than expecting them to come to where I am, I'm a step closer, and I think then I'm more likely to take action.
I like that very much, Bruce. And just to reference it from Francis's point of view, he's really clear. I just think that we haven't done very well in getting the contents of the document out there one way or the other. It's not the words, it's the ideas. He's talking about creating a culture of encounter, precisely what you're mentioning, a culture of relationship. If God is relationship, well, we're more like God the more we relate. A culture of solidarity, so that we really care about one another. One of the famous lines of this document: "We are not God." We have placed ourselves in the place of God. We decide, we impose what will be better for other people. And what Francis is saying, what Christ came to show us, is no, it's walking with, it's together. I mean, Christ was here. He couldn't change the world. He decided to give us that task. And it's a lifelong task. Francis says, we need to strengthen the conviction that we are one single human family, one race. If we think we have difficult race relations, Black Lives Matter, well, what the heck? What are we doing? We have a society which is built on egoism, selfishness, me first, get ahead. Today, New York Times, from New York, my home base, reports on a study, said those who finish college, this is really important, those who finish, not those who went to college and left, those who finish college have these 3 qualities. This is what is being praised in our society. 1, they earn much more. And that's, so earning more, that's success. 2nd, they live longer. What about the people who die of hunger? What about the people who don't have a place to sleep tonight? What about racist institutions, which we are part of? Live longer? Is that what we're after for some people? No. What the document is asking for everybody, all things. And the 3rd thing that says those who finish college are more likely to be happy. God forbid. How could they be happy knowing that 2/3 of humanity doesn't have enough to eat? We're stewards as a society. People at the service of an economy, rather than an economy at the service of people. Our goal has to be to care for one another, to listen to one another, to share together the journey that we're all on together. Not only respecting diversity, but promoting it. It enriches us. It enables us to be more alive, more human, more like God. So that's where I would go with it. I think we really need to be those people that Bruce has given testimony to. We welcome and we also assume the results of our own incapacity to relate well, to impose our will on others.
So I see that we have about 5 minutes left. I could go on much longer, but some of us have class to get to in a little bit. Are there any audience questions in the meantime? Anyone would like to raise? I see Hannah with her hand up.
Yes, I have a question on kind of the smallness of the individual. So one of the issues, like I am very much aware, I'm at the awareness stage that we just talked about, but it's how do you combat the discouragement of being aware that most of the environmental problems are not caused by individual people in their homes, they're caused by manufacturing, these big systems that I don't know how to address other than writing them to say, make your labels easier to remove so I can recycle them, please. So how would you, I guess, answer that kind of discouragement and move forward practically as an individual?
Well, I think that's one of the great things about law is that it's a communal thing, right? It's a polity of people coming together and saying, these are the rules that we're all going to live by. And so we need rules that help guide us towards better decision making. And sometimes that's rules that impose restrictions on us or guide our behavior. Sometimes it's guiding, because you're right that the individual can only do so much. But I also wouldn't discount what individuals can do and even what companies can and will do. So, you know, Walmart is a company that has some real downsides to it, but also has done some really interesting, important environmental initiatives. And so I think changes can be made in all different forms. But again, I just keep coming back to, I think that the thing I like about law is that it is essentially a communal experience of people coming together and agreeing to live according to certain norms. And that creates possibilities that expand far beyond the ability of individuals. It helps us, each of us, be part of something much bigger, which is what ultimately you're saying we need in order to solve these problems. And I agree with that.
In over 32 years, Hannah, 3 steps forward and 2 steps back, and that's okay. So it's about my time soon to hand this off to you and others of your generation, and I'll gladly do so. And you'll be taking probably 3 steps forward and 2 steps back.
And I would add to that I think it's the process. If we do it respectfully, if we listen to one another, if we don't impose, we try to walk together, that anybody by our values, the values of our society, would look at Jesus Christ and say, what a flop. And yet many people admire and consider Jesus the Son of God. He chose to empty himself. And would that be discouraging? This was his path. He gave himself entirely too. And it's not authority which came down, it's authority which washes feet, which serves. So it's not in the success, riding off into the sunset, the Lone Ranger, all of our movies, all of our fiction, but none of real life is that. Real life is being in this together. It's forever. So even though you want to sit back, Bruce, you'll never, you'll always be challenged and invited to take the next step forward. Well, maybe they'll be carrying you and me, but what a great generation we have behind us. They're so enthused about creating a better world, a better society. Fridays for the future, stopping class, realizing what do we need class for if we don't even have an environment? We don't care about one another. We got a great reason to hope. We got young people who care.
Yeah, I was just going to say that even though you feel like maybe one person who feels one way, there's always going to be somebody else who is going to feel the same way too about something. And, just to connect with that person. And, now there's 2 of you to work on, the issue that you think is a problem. And for me, it's always been about like never giving up. Because there's so many people and there's so many things that would you could stop something in one day, you know, like, oh, this is just too much for me to take on or whatever. I think it's, you know, you just have to be really committed. And if you're that passionate about something, you know, you just don't give up on it. And, you know, using other people and finding community for like the issues that you care about are really important. So that's one thing I found with the activist work I've kind of done is finding other people to support you and people that you can rely on, and just have you know, exchange ideas about, even if it's like, oh, I really don't feel like I can keep going with this, there's too much opposition, you know, those people that you agree with are going to be there to support you. And you know, it could be work colleagues, could be your group, you know, that you're involved with, or any form of different kind of people. It's you know, that's one of the ways it's really helped me. Yeah, and you know, you just gotta realize, hey, maybe I just don't give up, I just make smaller steps, or however that appears, you know, for your whatever you care about.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Well, this has been a wonderful discussion. I hate to have such a hasty goodbye, but I really appreciate everybody taking an hour today. I wish we could take another 2 hours to keep going, but we got to keep going for days. But definitely please stay tuned for more events from EELS. Thank you, Father Art, Bruce Morrison from Great Rivers Environmental Law Center in St. Louis, Professor Agard, and then Jennifer Clark from Clean Air Council.
Thank you, Alice and Michael and Nick. Thank you very much for thinking to reach out.
Absolutely. Have a wonderful rest of your day, everybody. Thank you.
Good to meet
Everyone.
Good to see you.